Hi, everybody. We are so delighted to have three wonderful women entrepreneurs, all of whom are Harvard alumni, for this discussion. And we have a seasoned entrepreneur, lawyer turned entrepreneur, and educator turned entrepreneur. And they all come from a various backgrounds. And all of you have seen their very fabulous bios. So I'm not going to waste time to read their bios because our time is very precious, so is yours. And I want to make sure that you get as much from this conversation and from their insight and experience they gain throughout their entrepreneurship. So the first question I'm just going to divide it up. And let me start with Cassie. And I introduced you as a seasoned entrepreneur, but also you started off like after finishing MBA at Harvard Business School. You first worked for a company and then later ended up founding your company. So what is that process like? And how do you feel in the after COVID world about that choice now?
Yeah. Well, okay, so there's two things. One is the process of starting my own business after working for others. And the second thing is COVID. So the short answer, and I'm open, if people want to put more questions in the chat or you want to embellish upon something, but I don't have problems with authority. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs I know that do have problems with authority. And I mean that like in a funny and cute way. They just can't work for other people. So I actually, one of the things I've observed over the years is when I see MBAs that I went to school with and they've started their own business, I know they probably can also work for somebody else and have done that even to get into business school, right? Unless they were, the founder of a company and that's how they got into Harvard Business School. So that's number one. I can work for other people or I can do stuff on my own, right? And then there's some people who are the total opposite. It really stresses them out having their own business. And I know one person who had to sort of step back and go back to a government job because that structure is what worked for them. So the first thing is really just like, do you have the mindset? Are you the personality type, who could do that? And in fact, you may be able to do many things, but don't be afraid to try it. And a lot of people try things as a side hustle. I basically did a spreadsheet and I said, people are asking me for business advice and I could make in half the time what I make working full time. And it was more than full time, actually, what I was doing. Because isn't that what we do, right? Like we're just going to, do it to the nth degree. And I said, I think I could do this. I know what it is to write proposals. I had worked in sales at a consulting company, which is a really important sales background. You're selling something all the time, And I sent out that first email telling people I was starting my business, and it just felt like stepping off a cliff. It just felt like such a risk to me. I was so used to my nice, comfortable pats on the head and working for other people. And then, one project came in, and then another project came in because my first business was a consulting firm. So that's how that started. Now I'm in the women's leadership area. And we do workshops and classes and coaching for women around the world. And I teach that at GW. And in COVID, I have watched the female recession happen. And there's some specific reasons why it's women and why women are dropping out of the workforce at 4 times the rate of men. But I'm watching it happen. And at the same time, I'm watching other women's businesses skyrocket. Like the founder of Madison Reed is somebody I know, and that's at-home hair color that you match and order online. And that's just exploded. So that's really about keeping up with the growth. In my business, I'm teaching online. Everything has converted to online. A presentation I was going to give in Trinidad, canceled. And that actually turned into something bigger, which was called Caribbean Girls Hack. And girls from all over the Caribbean were there, in Africa actually. And so I think there's opportunities in this dark time.
Yeah. And I really do want to like unpack some of the stuff that you mentioned, especially in terms of like, you know, how women are responding to this COVID era. I do want to give the floor to Ali, because you're a lawyer, like, you know, you like me, like you work at a big law, and then you even like clerk for a judge, but then now like you saw an opportunity. Often, like, you know, people choose entrepreneurship for various reasons. Some, it could be just passion, and, you know, like they kept it on hold, but suddenly they realized like that's what they really want. And for you, to me, it sounded more like there was an opportunity, and you seized that. You perhaps like you could share like your experience of transitioning from an attorney at big law to really funding your business, and knowing that you would be leaving a structured business that comes very steady cash flow to set up your own business.
Yeah, no, and so much of what Kathy said really resonated with me. I think, you know, I don't have a problem with authority in general, and I was really having a good experience working at my law firm, though I was, you know, asked to bill my time and track it in 6-minute increments. So it was a very, very structured, you know, work environment where I was just only responding to demands and project assignments from other people. My firm ended up making some choices about who they were representing, to where I did have a problem with working for that organization. And it wasn't, you know, inherently that that's a characteristic of mine, but more, this is no longer a place where I'm interested in spending, you know, 300 hours a month billing for these other people anymore. And I did see an opportunity to create policy change on the Me Too movement. And as a young lawyer and as somebody who'd experienced these behaviors in the workplace myself, I felt like there was so much awareness being raised about a subject, but what I felt like the unique thing I could bring to the moment was written down policy change. How are we going to make sure this translates into written down changes to the rules, both in terms of workplace policies and in terms of public policy? And I felt like I could do that, and that I had the right relationships and the right background and expertise to build an organization. So I consider myself a social entrepreneur. I started out by founding 2 nonprofit organizations. We have a 501c3 and a 501c4, which are affiliated. But actually over time, just this past year, I have also started a for-profit consulting business that now is related to that work, but is work that has come about because of the policy work I was doing through the nonprofit.
Okay, and that's so wonderful, and I will have a follow-up question, and this is just like to introduce our female founders for our wonderful audience. And Rashada, you are educator turned to an owner of a diva dance studio, where like I actually dance, or I used to before the COVID era. And I think like you have very unique experience, and just like, you know, and I like knowing you, I know it's more like a passion driven project. And, you know, please do share your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm an educator. I've taught, I've been a school leader here in DC. And I just love to dance. And I always knew that I wanted to have my own dance studio. I was fearful, and I was like, that's a long-term goal for me, something I'll achieve, you know, 10, 15 years from now. But there was an opportunity that fell into my lap. Timing was right, and I went for it. And I actually identify as a very risk-averse individual. So being an entrepreneur and being a business owner has been like a very large stretch for me. However, it's one that I lean into, and I actively coach myself on being more in tune with taking risks, because that's how you make it in business. That's how you make it as an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. I know that Kathy said that she felt like she was jumping off a cliff almost. I feel the exact same way. So I 100% identify with that. Interestingly enough, I was a school leader last year, and I was ready to take my leap. I was ready. Diva Dance was projected to do a lot of great things in 2020. and I needed to just free up my time. So I took a contract position that gave me a lot of flexibility. And I turned in my 2 weeks notice and I left my job as a school leader. My last day was February 14th. And we all know what happened 3 weeks later, the world shut down. So I had to do a lot of pivoting and adjusting. And now I'm still running Diva Dance, just completely scaled back, dramatically different from what I was offering before. But I'm also now working as a program director at a nonprofit that teaches high school students entrepreneurship. So I'm able to combine both my love for being an entrepreneur with my love of education. And I get to teach students to do the same. So I feel like I have found like the perfect balance for me where I get to combine both of my loves and my joys. So.
Wonderful.
You guys are awesome. I just want to say that. I love listening to your stories and how amazing you are.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, she is. And just listening to like each of your story, it felt like somehow like, you know, all your experience or past experience somehow came in full circle. Like that was something just happened so organically, or it led to where you are. And often, like sometimes I hear people are worried that when you're transitioning to something new, like almost like you start like from afresh, but not necessarily, because your experience can be so handy in whatever you do. Can you share a bit light on that?
You want me to start?
Oh, each one of you, yeah.
So is the question about, just to make sure I'm answering what you're asking, is the question about the starting fresh versus, you know, the organic, sort of that, it almost sounds like the pain of transition a little bit. It seems good, right? Looking back.
Yeah,
but it makes sense. But when you're in it, it's really scary and can kind of suck. So that's the reality, I think, of being an entrepreneur. I mean, for me, and a lot of people I know get into entrepreneurship because they know what they don't want. They may think about what they do want, but number one on the list is, I don't want that anymore. And that's what happened to me. I was working in an organization where I basically had two bosses, where I was delivering 75% to each of them. So I was exhausted. I was 150%, but each of them were like, you're not giving me 100%. And it just felt like a recipe for failure. And that in a way gave me courage, because I thought, well, it can't be worse than this. So let's try it. But underlying that, I'm very financially conservative. So I had a plan, I had money saved. And I don't think I would do it otherwise. That's just how I'm wired. I'm very financially conservative. So I needed to know, how is this going to work? How many months can I do this? And also still keep irons in the fire for if I wanted to go back out and get a job. And I did get a few job offers actually as I was starting my company. And that was one of the hardest things. It's like saying goodbye to the old me, who did pretty well, you know, and saying hello to the new me, who had nothing in the bank at that time other than savings. So it's really like, what is the perspective for me, where I'm saying, here's the amount of time, here's what I have set aside. And it couldn't be worse than the situation I was in before. I was really unhappy, and there was no price that it would be worth it for me. So hopefully that's answering what you're asking.
Yeah. No, that's great. And Ali, and just building up what Cassie said, and you know, I know lawyers are often, they're like more tend to be risk averse, and you did transition and really took this huge risk. But has there been in your time while you're starting your company and from nonprofit to now like for-profit business, am I doing this right? Like, is this working for me? Like, how did you overcome the self-doubt that comes with this? And also constantly examining your business model and just like reviewing whether it's working or not. And how did you overcome those moments to really pivot from there and keep going?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, you know, to the point about experience, what I felt like when I started this was that I had the right mix of experience for the substantive work that I wanted to do, the policy work and the advice that I knew I wanted to give about what good policy should be in this space. What I did not appreciate and have learned a lot about is the whole other skill set of running a business, being an entrepreneur, how to forge these relationships and how to manage myself. And, that has been, and self-doubt and pivoting and all of those things. So that's really been a journey. It'll be 3 years in January that I've been doing this, and just looking back with our anniversary approaching to how far we've come and how different the organizations look from what I thought they would look like at the beginning is sort of astounding, really. As far as the self-doubt piece goes, I've found that every step along the way, I have gained another supporter of some kind, whether it's a business that's sponsored us or a lawmaker that's endorsed our work, where it really fuels my fire and it makes me feel like I can't walk away from this right now. Our very first corporate sponsor was Amazon. And when that happened, I felt like, okay, if Amazon is interested in what we are doing and we are trying to create change in the workplace, I got to do this. And that happened in March, just a couple months in. But it's not always been clear to me what I'm then doing, but I felt this drive and this responsibility to keep it going. And even just this fall, another example of something like that, we found out that just before her passing, Justice Ginsburg had won a prize that came with a monetary donation, and she allocated it to several organizations, and ours was one of them. So now, once again, I feel this pressure around like, okay, she believed in this, and this is the kind of work I want to do. You have to figure it out. I don't always know exactly how to do that, but that does give me the drive when I don't necessarily feel like I can do it for myself. I think about those other people who've invested in and believe in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, congratulations. Oh, wow, that must felt something. That's so wonderful. And Rashada, and really, and I absolutely commend what you're doing, especially now, like we all know that the small business is suffering. And you really started at a time when really COVID hit. And I remember like the vibrant diva dance community, like everybody was like, we enjoy this being together. And now really switching to this online business. And, we talk about even like Zoom fatigue, and all of that would affect your business too.
Yes.
Because sometimes I think I'm done with online. Like I really need to go to gym. Like has been my approach, and I know a lot of people do feel that. So so how are you dealing with this post-COVID world? And I know you mentioned that, and it's kind of like you being risk averse, and I think I would have done the same thing. You also tried to have another job to just balance it off. Like, do you see like, okay, let me see how this goes, or like you're very much still committed to your business?
Well, okay, so that's a great question. I would say I'm 100% committed. Is my enthusiasm about my commitment as high as it used to be? No, it's not. And that's actually something that I've had to personally analyze because I have felt in December, this month, I have felt low about my confidence in my business, mainly because, as we know in the fitness world, January is a huge month. And I know that will not be the same for me going into this upcoming year. And Zoom fatigue is real. I've been having outdoor classes, but I know for a fact that as January is coming, I'm not going to be able to offer that anymore just because it's too cold. I'm already looking at what the weather looks like for Saturday for an outdoor class. And I'm like, whew, all right, I'm going to push through, but it will definitely be the last outdoor class that I have for probably until March or April. And so I have had online Zoom classes, but I feel like I have a completely different business. I've had to start from square one all over again with the online aspect, just because that's not what people are used to. And that's not what people initially signed up for. So I am literally finding a brand new clientele. And so I feel like I'm starting all over. And then what makes it even more daunting is once the world does open back up, whenever that is, I'm once again going to have to find a whole new clientele and build back up all over again. So I think some of my lower enthusiasm comes from knowing that, like, all that I'm doing now to build back up is gonna have to be done all over again once everything opens back up. And so that's daunting, because I think like it's me, you know, like all of my I want to say employees, but all of my staff, they're contract workers. So it's not like I have like a large staff to help me. It's me. And it's me bouncing ideas off of people here and there whenever I can catch them. It's me bouncing ideas off of my fiance, who's always telling me, can we just have a little more balance between talking about business and like not talking about business? And so I feel like I have been more generative, and I have to bring up different ideas all the time, more than I ever have in my entire life. And so at some point I'm like, okay, I want to just put things on autopilot like before, but I know I don't have that privilege right now. And so that's something that I've had to come to terms with. And so it's a growing opportunity for me, and I'm still growing and I'm going to keep growing. But I know the most important thing is to not give up.
That give me a great segue, because I think challenges often is a growth opportunity, right? Like, you know, that's we truly where we really grow. And, you know, because if life is too smooth, then we wouldn't advance. So speaking of challenges, and this is a question for everybody, and, you know, we can start with Cassie. So it's like a twofold questions. I believe in supporting female entrepreneurs. I believe in women empowerment. It doesn't matter whether it's entrepreneur, lawyer, or any profession. But at the same time, women are also the ones who tend to put down each other. And often, I think, in a way, some part of it's because designed by the system. There's only one position that's available, and we're all trying to compete for that. There's so many multiple factors too. So what is life like being like a woman founder? Like, what are some of the challenges? And, but what about like some of the perks of it too? Like, you know, perhaps like each one of you could shed a light on that.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the challenges, I have had very limited experience with the world of women putting each other down. Some of it is because, you know, for instance, I just don't really entertain that type of talk. Like if somebody wants to talk about somebody behind their back, I don't know that they're going to come to me and gossip. I tend to be an ally, you know, for women and look at the positive. But additionally, I think that what you're talking about is sort of a symptom of tokenism, right? Which is, oh, there's just one place here in this organization for the woman, and we're all competing. My experience has been the opposite. You know, number one, diversity and inclusion is becoming more real now, and not just letters in a lot of organizations. And there's a real pressure to step up, right? Or else you really look like you're from the Paleolithic era. So whether the intention is correct or not, organizations better be stepping up right now. And there's going to be somewhat of like a death match for human capital, because the millennials, which were the biggest generation, are now moving up. And now Gen Z is coming in, which is the kids of Gen X. And that was a smaller generation. So there's going to be a constriction. So the companies better give Gen Z and organizations what they're looking for. But the second thing is that being in so many male-dominated environments throughout my career, like even now, the class I teach at George Washington University, Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership, is in the Department of Management, which has so few women. And so when I was in business consulting, in merger and acquisition and competitive analysis, I was one of 2 female professional staffers. I kind of found it fun and interesting. And then more women came in after me. So I tend to look from a position of abundance. And if I am ever feeling like a victim, I say, how can I be resourceful? What can I do to sort of turn this situation around? And it has not been a yellow brick road all the time. You know, I've had to get in there and advocate for myself, but I've been able to do that based on relationships that I have. So look at things from a position of abundance, make those relationships. Don't be hesitant, get in there, explain what you're doing, what your vision is, sync it up, with an organization's vision or a partner or a client, right? Have those conversations, build those relationships. Neurologically, women are actually supposed to be superior at this. So use that asset to get over the speed bumps and hurdles when they're there, and use your resourcefulness to create opportunities for yourself. That's sort of it. Of course, there's much more to it than that, but that's been my experience.
Okay. Ali?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I come at this from a unique perspective because the work that I do too, right, is women's empowerment. So I'm lucky in that a lot of the people I deal with are already invested in that cause, and the pool of, people I encounter who are likely to make a belittling remark without recognizing it. I think I'm exposed a little bit less to that group because the people I'm working with are really interested in the topic and more woke maybe than most on it. But I will say, and this is, I think, an issue that I've definitely experienced and has been a challenge for me, and is probably true for whatever kind of entrepreneurship you're going into, is just the competitiveness that is out there as a new entrant to the market. My market happens to be feminism, so that's been very interesting in how that plays out. But the existing organizations that touch on the work that I do, organizations like the National Women's Law Center and Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, right? Like, I was very deliberate before I launched my organization to go around those orgs to understand what they were doing in this space and to carve out a lane for myself that was not duplicating their efforts, but was something unique to add to the conversation. And I think certain people and certain organizations have been better about acknowledging that and being collaborative allies, while others have seen us as this new organization that is a threat to their funding, right? Where like we're now working with Amazon, and other people might have liked to have that relationship and don't have it, right? So I think that's not necessarily women putting other women down. I think it is just, when you are a new entrant into a market, you're disrupting, and the old guard is going to have some resistance to that. So my advice would just be to try to do as much as you can to prove that you're not, that you are, what your lane is, and why you are an important entrant into the market, and to be able to explain that well to other people, because it's a question I get not just from those other organizations, but also from my clients and my corporate partners, right? Is how is what you're doing different from these other organizations? And it's helped me just have a thicker skin, right, about when people do criticize me or insinuate that I shouldn't be here. I know why I'm here, right? I'm very firm in that, and it doesn't really rattle me.
Okay. So Rashada, I think, perhaps like you could talk about from your educational experience as an educator as well, like perhaps like, how women can respond to, sometimes we could be underestimated. And
yeah.
Right, like, and sometimes it can work towards your advantage, because you could really shine in that moment and surprise them and rise to the occasion and even do it better. And sometimes that could actually like hurt you, like that could, it's kind of demeaning. And how do women should respond to like scenarios like that in position where they've been kind of like put into that category, like you're not good enough, like, there's like a different way of looking at you as an individual.
Right. Absolutely. So in the field of education, everyone knows that is mainly a female dominated field. However, I like to break it down. Teaching is mainly female dominated. And when you look at a school, typically school leaders are the males. And so I have been in a situation before where, as assistant principal, I was a female, my principal was a female, and we had a dean of students that was a male. We were interviewing someone, and they came right in and went straight to the male and was like, "Oh, you must be the principal." And me and the actual principal were like, "Actually, he's just the dean of students." And I don't mean it in like a just way, but like, he wasn't the principal, he wasn't the assistant principal. That was the women in the room. And it's just so interesting when you witness that, because it's like, really, why is it that society, why is it that America devalues educators? And why is it that it's seen more so of a female dominated field? And I think a lot of it just goes to lack of lack of valuing and the poor wages, honestly. And so to build your way up in education, like, you really have to be strategic. You have to like know the right people. And unfortunately, like, it really is like, are you a part of some of these big organizations? Like, did you do Teach for America? I did. Did you go to Harvard? I did, you know? So like, I was strategic in positioning myself because I didn't want anything to hold me back. And so that, I know that those are privileges that I've had that other people have not. And so, but I also don't walk around saying, oh yeah, I did this. Oh yeah, I did that. I like for my work to speak for itself. But there are times when a male will overlook what you have to say. There are times when you will be mansplained very easily. And it's just a matter of knowing your worth, knowing your value, and being assertive in those moments. And it also helps when you have other women in the room who can also raise and lift up your voice, and call out when it happens. Yeah, it's not something that one person can do on their own. It really is a collective effort, unfortunately, right? Because when the tables are turned, men can say and do what they want. Women, we cannot. We have to be reserved. We have to be respectable. We have to carry ourselves in a way that doesn't offend men, or being too assertive isn't necessarily seen as an asset for females, yet it is for men. So we just have to figure out how to do it in our own way as we bat our eyes and smile.
Yeah. And Rayhan, can I add one thing onto that? Which, because I love what you're saying and all the points you're bringing up. And there are two researchers who I find fascinating, who write on male allyship. And it's sort of taking this idea of the echo chamber, right? Of being there and echoing each other's points that maybe are getting steamrolled in meetings or co-opted or whatever it is, right? And saying, hey guys, get in on this also. And so it's Brad Johnson and David Smith. Both of them are instructors at military institutions, and they have a new book out called Good Guys, and it is mind-blowing. So we're there right now. We're there right now, and the leading edge is doing this and learning about it and reading it, and everybody else is just catching up.
Yeah, and I would just say too, just really quickly to add that, I've been really lucky that some of our best relationships have been with men. The general counsels of Amazon, Uber, and Airbnb, which were our three main first corporate partners, all men who cared about this issue and actually were better advocates internally in the companies, I think, than a woman leader would have been, because when they're saying, hey, we need to focus on this sexual harassment problem, the C-suite will listen, in a way. So I think finding those allies and then allowing them to speak up for you, they're a better messenger in a lot of ways on this issue than I am. Sometimes I'll just ask one of them to do an event for me and let the world hear it from them, as opposed to, from myself. So I really do agree with that.
Yeah, no, I personally felt like, in my profession too, like some of the best mentors of mine turn out to be male mentors. And even like, I notice sometimes the way we think is very different. Like, if I'm preparing a presentation, like I put like the big picture, but they tend to like, move things around and they put numbers first. And I learned like, okay, so like, that's something that I need to present first, and just like, oh, like this is an idea I have. So now like we're living in this like COVID era. And if somebody says like, what, I might have an idea right now. How do I turn that into a business venture? And then how do I reach out to maybe founders, or how do I actually, raise capital or fund my business? Like, what is your advice? Let's start with Cassie, sorry, and Rashada, and then Ali.
Well, I'm a big fan of venture plan contests. The reason is that recent research has shown it really opens up the field in terms of diversity, for women to get their ideas noticed. And you're also kind of working over or sidestepping or, skipping the step, which is, can I do this? What do I do? Right. And you're just, boom, you're in the lane of this competition. They're telling you when to submit your date, what date to submit, what the content should be. They're going to have workshops. For GW, it's all gone online, for example, and you could do one where you are needing to pair up with a student and call the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, or whatever it's called at that university, and get matched up with a team. You could use your experience to help them. There's some that don't require that you actually pair up with students. There's non-university sponsored competitions. There's Halcyon House, right? And so just get in and piggyback on that momentum. Even if you're just kind of watching the contest that from last year that they're putting online, because that's what a lot of these institutions are doing now, is pushing it all online. And then they're going to have more of a diverse pull. But the second thing is about money. And so there's two things. One is, are you raising money? And the second is, do you have money? I was in the .com era, okay, back, back before electricity. And so this was a time where you're hearing about these environments with, oh, we've got the ping pong table and we've got the coffee and the drinks. And this has only just started coming back. You see it in sort of co-working spaces or in companies like Netflix or Tesla or Google, right? And so what a lot of investors who remember that time want is to see traction. They want to see progress. So even if you just have to push something out there and you feel like it's 50% of the way there, get reactions. Use it for what's called customer discovery, right? Which is the key to the universe. If your customers don't want it, you're not going to be selling anything. So as my finance professor at Harvard said, to be in business, you need to make stuff and sell stuff. People want to make it a lot more complicated, but you need to make sure those customers are buying and you're selling. And even if you just sell it to one customer and get it going, then you're really in business to talk to, whether it's debt financing, banks, et cetera, or equity financing through angel investors. And I would encourage people to look at angel investor networks like Golden Seeds, like True Wealth Ventures, which was started by Carrie Rupp, who is an HBS alum. Stuff like that. Really start putting your sort of tentacles and feelers out there in those communities, see what they're saying, watch one of the contests, consider entering one, and piggyback on their momentum, because momentum is something, an inspiration and feeling like, yeah, I'm going to do this. COVID and George Floyd and some of the things that have happened recently don't make everybody feel like, yeah. So if you need to borrow somebody else's momentum, that would be my suggestion.
And Ali, and just building up what Cassie said, and if somebody right now, like in this code era, like they identified an opportunity, let's say, but then I think there is a bit of concern, like would this opportunity still like sustainable, like in post-COVID era? Like, and when you start off like this, you kind of like, it was the aftermath of the Me Too movement, and obviously this issue stayed, but there was a bit of backlash against the Me Too movement too, right? Like, and still like that, we're still having this discussion, and some male colleagues are complaining about this moment. So how should one weigh the benefit of seizing this kind of like opportunity or crisis, if you will, and then just like sort of like move it forward with the opportunity they identified in this kind of particular time in their life?
Yeah, it's a great question. Rashida, were you going to say something? You look like you were going to jump in. So
yeah, I was. Thank you, Ali. I was just wanting to say that what Kathy was saying is so true. Like finding like a pitch competition to join, it gives you such an invaluable experience. Like even if nothing comes of it, it's just the practice and the confidence building of putting yourself out there and sharing your ideas publicly, because a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid to make that jump and to put themselves out there. And so you just have to go for it. You just have to do it. And you have to push through that discomfort. And then I was going to say, looking for grants, like look for grants, especially for women businesses, look for those. that's helpful as well. Okay, that's all. Thank you, Allie.
Yeah, no, and you know, what you were saying earlier about this being a difficult moment was really resonating with me as well, even though my business isn't one that's so obviously impacted by COVID in the way that yours is. It really has been very disruptive for us as well. I was supposed to be at Amazon on March 10th, and then at Expedia on March 12th to do big report outs on this project. Then I was going to go down to San Francisco the next 2 days. And that whole trip, you know, obviously got pulled down. And that was the beginning of the big 2020 pivot that has been my life since then. And, you know, just like my enthusiasm, as you were saying, has been a little bit lower because so much of my life revolved around travel and going to events and conferences. Even like this one was supposed to be in person, right? And those opportunities are still happening, but I hop on Zoom from my house and it's not always as fun. And so definitely, you know, the mindset of perseverance and pushing through this, I think, is not one to be underestimated. It's been a really challenging year, I think, for everybody. You know, to your question about the backlash, that actually was a big driving force for why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I could see that coming. And I think I felt nervous from the minute that Me Too took off that this could potentially result in a backslide for women in the workplace. And my feeling was, if we could put in place the right policies to deal with this, that doesn't have to be the case. So I'm a big proponent of encouraging companies to put in place really transparent and robust investigation procedures and corrective action procedures that don't jump to fire this person. Because I think the more people believe that, you know, allegations are going to be looked at carefully and that people have the opportunity to correct smaller behaviors that they may not have realized were problematic, that's actually better for the cause and better for the issue. So I think trying to see these challenges as a part of the work that you're here to do is really important. It's easier said than done. But, you know, there was a question in the list about that you sent about failures. And I know it sounds a little cheesy, but I really think of challenges as just information, right? Like this person rejects this idea or they reject this policy proposal. That's not about me. Don't take it personally. It's not even about the issue. It's information about how to do my job better. If somebody is saying, you know, I don't want to work with junior women anymore, that's a piece of the puzzle that I now am here to solve, as opposed to being demoralized by it. But don't get me wrong, especially when you're working on something that is so personal and that you're so passionate about, it's really hard to do that. And I think working into your own schedule and life, you know, the people around you who are going to remind you of why you're here doing what you're doing in those moments, and also the time for yourself to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Like, I really wouldn't underestimate the importance of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. And I do want to, like, you know, open the floor for questions and make sure, like, you know, all of you who are on the line, like, if you have questions, please do raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask the questions, because this forum and today's discussion is truly about you. And, you know, I want you to take as much as you can from these discussions.
And while we're waiting for people to put in questions, I did want to mention one thing, which is that women, there's a ridiculous amount of research showing that when you invest in women, whether it's entrepreneurs or move them up to different levels, higher levels at the corporate level, that we create wealth, right? So this whole idea of, you know, why should I do this? And there's a lot of barriers in the way. We want to work through these barriers. We want to invest in women, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we actually create more opportunities for everybody. And if you begin even opening this box of research about women and the wealth they create, we can increase countries' GDPs. You know, we make the majority of household purchasing decisions, and companies that move women up to executive leadership positions are more profitable across every measure. So I think it's in everybody's best interest to figure that out. And I like to empower women with that knowledge so that we're leading instead of sort of backpedaling a little. This is something we're a growth industry. We're like the growth industry. And I think, why don't we know this? That was one of my big shocks when I started teaching women's leadership at GW. I thought, how do we not know this? So I'm just going to put that out there.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so the questions are coming in and all of them are wonderful questions. Let's just, you know, jump in then. The first one, as someone interested in entrepreneurship, but we don't have an idea yet, like what advice do you have on how to realize the goal of being an entrepreneur?
Just real quick, if this person went, oh, this is Shada. Shada, you're in my women's entrepreneurial leadership class, I think. So on the first day of class, we're going to do something called a mind mapping exercise. And anybody on the call, you can you can search and find free mind mapping software. A lot of entrepreneurs and people who want to be more creative use this tool to come up with an idea out of just an area of interest. So if you have an area of interest like music or dancing or photography or coffee, right, which is like my life right now, you can come up with a business idea. So, and anybody who wants that exercise, I do have it videoed if you want to email me at frey, F-R-E-Y, @gwu.edu. So mind mapping is something entrepreneurs actually really do, and then opportunity scanning. But I'll let you guys weigh in on this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Find something that you're passionate about, because whatever you start, you will be spending a lot of time with. So you got to make sure that you're actually enjoying what it is that you're doing. I will say as an entrepreneur, I've realized that there are things that I like doing. And so there are some small entrepreneurial businesses that I'm about to start as well. It was a huge failure on my first launch, but I enjoy it. So I'm going to try again.
Yeah. And the American culture, we actually deal with failure a lot different. We work with women. We've worked with women from like 138 countries in my second business, which basically teaches what I teach at GW. And we flaunt our failures. So meanwhile, just remember that it's okay to come out with it and be like, yeah, I totally face planted on that one, but next. And our culture is okay with that. So sort of get over yourself, put it out there just like you did. I love that, Rashida. And wear it proudly like a badge. You're ready. You're officially in, the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good segue to just touch on one of the other questions I see, which is someone saying that they, ran a company that felt like it was their baby, and, is that how you feel? And is that maybe something women entrepreneurs do more than men? I don't know about the gendered piece of it. I just think that, but I do agree that no matter what you do, it is going to feel like your baby. And that makes it really challenging at times. Like it makes the rejections feel so much more personal. And I think that for that reason, finding something that you're really passionate about is really important. I think that I wouldn't be able to keep doing this and put the amount of energy that it requires into it if it weren't something that I both was passionate about, but also felt like I'm uniquely suited to do this work. Like this is what my calling is in a way. And I do feel that way. And it is what gives me sort of the perseverance to do it during the harder moments.
Yeah, and as far as the feeling like your baby, that is super common. And entrepreneurs I know work daily on this, and it's a battle. And I think 2 books are really good for that. One is The E-Myth, which is just a classic. And most entrepreneurs I know have read, and it's really talking about taking the business from I to we or it, right? And really making that transition mentally and taking some steps that you need to do that. And the other one, I actually have this is a friend of mine who wrote this brilliant book called Loving Your Business by Debbie King. And she really gets into that mindset of sort of the extraction you have to do, pulling yourself out of your business a little bit. And that's necessary for growth. But is it natural to feel like, oh, it's my baby and I take it personally? Sure.
And I just want to say one comment. And sometimes it's an opportunity, but also just like for me, like I just identify that there's a community that hasn't been served, which was the Turkic lawyers. Like there's so many bar associations in America, but there hasn't been one for my community. And that's how sort of my side hustle in a way, like my path to entrepreneurship came about. And it could be just service oriented. You're just trying to help your community, and a community could be in your neighborhood and that, or even a pro bono, volunteer work, that through that you gained a different insight or perspective to life, right? And I think that that could also lead to an opportunity. So what sort of trends and opportunities are you seeing for female founders? Are any particular industries or business types standing out these days? Great question. Rashada?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I would say there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs in the online space. So anything that's an online business, anything helping online businesses, that's a huge market right now because we're all online. And even though things are looking up, we're still going to be online for a while. And so if you can find something that has an online component and it's solving some sort of need. So like, for instance, people who are seamstress, they've made a killing making masks. So just finding something that, you know, people want now during these times. So people want ways to connect with others. So if you can find a way to create, maybe it's an app, a way that people can connect. So like the house party app, it blew up, you know, at the beginning of all this. So people wanted a way to connect with others in a fun way. So if you find something along those lines, I think that is the way to go.
Wonderful.
I have a couple comments on that. I mean, one is that I would say the industry where women and young people have been pointed out as making a huge difference right now is change. It's social change. And so a lot of different movements that you see really picking up steam and gaining visibility, who are already doing great work, right? But it's just accelerated right now with the multiple crises our nation is facing. It's women and young people who are really standing out in this area. And so if there is a social venture or an idea, even something that really bothers you, just like Rashada was saying, it might be good to go and volunteer and get an idea and dip your toe in the water. Additionally, like also Rashada was saying,
Rashada.
Rashada, online grocery store sales, you know, weird things like online pet food sales. These are things that are skyrocketing right now, but it is going to be temporary. So I think the question is, what's going to happen afterwards? Some behaviors are going to be permanently changed, and they are going to continue to have more business than they probably did pre-COVID, but it's not going to be the skyrocketing level that we see now. But it really gets us thinking about this convenience culture, right? But again, I do come back to two things. One is, do you need structure? Number one, and if so, you may want to go to look into direct selling. There are people I know from Harvard Business School who completely crushed it in direct selling. And they really don't, they're somewhat recession proof. It's very interesting. So if you want structure, look at things like direct selling or franchising or licensing. And then if you don't, go back to that mind mapping idea. A really good opportunity is never going to be as much of a boost as something that you love doing and are passionate about. Unless in fact, the thing that you love doing and are passionate about is pursuing opportunities, in which case you should probably look at the top 5 or 10 growth markets.
Okay, so another question is how much of your, and Harvard connection, but I think it goes to like everybody, right? Like it could be your university connection or your past connections from your previous work, all this your networking. How much did that help you to grow your business?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think it's been hugely important to the work that I do in a couple of different ways. One is that, to my point earlier about feeling like I'm uniquely suited to do this work, I felt the confidence and also the imperative to do this work because of my Harvard Law degree, because I knew I could take this risk in certain ways and feel confident that I could land on my feet if it didn't work out because of this degree. I also felt like I had the connections to be able to get that early support and investment from validators that I needed. And then also just the law degree that I have as a social advocate has been, I think I really didn't appreciate how much it's allowed me to stand out in the nonprofit and advocacy world. So that's not so much about the Harvard name, but more about your unique education. So I think I've gotten traction with a lot of the corporate partners that I have because I speak directly with the general counsel's office, and the lawyers are always the ones who are going to kill something if they don't think it's a good idea. But if you can get the lawyers on board to recommend to the diversity and inclusion officer that they take on something, it's much easier to get it done that way. And so I think looking at not only what kind of network and validation does your Harvard name give to you, but also just what did you learn? What did your degree teach you that can make you uniquely suited to the work that you want to do?
Mm-hmm. For me, the Harvard degree is just credibility. But sometimes I can always see if it's an asset or not in what I call the bio test. So if I'm speaking somewhere and they say, will you send me your bio? And they include Harvard Business School, I know that it is an asset for their organization and their members. But if they don't include it, like if I'm talking to women in trades, right? Like women in auto care, women in federal law enforcement, that's a bit of a toss-up. It's almost like something they don't want to put out there, and they prefer to put out my research on women from all over the world called the Hot Mamas Project, which is just stories about women we know as case studies, because that's shown to increase a really important type of confidence. So that's more accessible than Harvard. So what I would say is be sure that you have something more accessible than Harvard, depending on what audiences you're working with, because it's not like the greatest thing to everybody in the world. My first job after business school, I had a guy say, I like it a lot more that you went to University of Virginia than you went to Harvard. So it can get you in the door, but just be cognizant, depending on what groups you're working with, of whether it's an asset or something you're going to kind of put in your back pocket till later. And then they get to know you. And then they say, oh, and you went to Harvard. And that's like surprising to them because you're nice and you went to Harvard.
I agree 100%. But I will say, so for me, my degree has helped me in the education field. So like the first job I got after grad school, my boss had done the same exact program, but it doesn't do anything for me for a diva dance because, completely different. But I do try to keep it on the back burner. But I don't lead with it. But it is great when people are like, oh, okay. When they do that, the head turn, oh, that's when like, yeah, they saw the H.
Right. Or if they haven't had too much Botox, their eyebrows go up. That's good. Good stuff.
And I think just like, in general, I also think that your friendships and colleagues, like all of that could be your good resources. And, and I also know like some female founders like who started off business because of the support of their small community. And even like colleagues pitched in, so that you don't just seek out some investors and end up sharing your own business with them. So all sorts of things happen. So I think your own, and I realize I think now I'm realizing more and more like the importance of networking too. Just people you meet and how like that relationship can assist you with so many different relationships. So all of which I think it's incredibly important. We're running out of time, so I'm gonna ask just one last question from everybody. Just reflecting your own journey. What are some of the advice that you received and you applied to your business and really worked, and you wish you want to impart on our audience today?
Mine is to have a scalable, repeatable process. Otherwise, the business is dependent on you. If it's not repeatable and teachable, you really can't hand it off and you're handicapping yourself. Even if there's just a life event, even if you don't want to grow the next public company, but you have a life event and you need somebody to take over, that's very helpful.
Wonderful. Ali?
There was a question earlier about co-founders, and I think knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and finding people, whether it's a co-founder or others you can bring in on your team to do the things you're not very good at, as opposed to trying to do them all. So my co-founder was really good at marketing. I am a long-winded policy nerd, so I can say what I want to say in 5,000 words, and she can say it in 10. And that's how we were able to put a website that like people can read, and that refine my pitch. And now I can do that, but that's not what came naturally to me. So I think knowing those things and finding people who can help you, shore up the skills that you may not naturally have is a good piece of advice.
That's a great advice. That's just wonderful advice, because none of us are just like, skills in every aspect, and just having somebody really complement your role as a business owner is absolutely plus. Rashada,
yeah, so my biggest thing is do not let perfection be the enemy of good. Like, it will not be perfect. Don't wait for it to be perfect. If you have an idea, start building and go. Launch it. Even if it's not all the way thought out, all the way built out, you should have a general plan. But if it's not perfect, that's okay. Keep going. You'll learn as you go, and don't allow those failures to stop you. Just learn from them and keep going. Do things afraid. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, because I know I'm the token HBS person here, and I'll never forget Dennis Hightower, who worked at Disney and was my general management professor, and then went on to work at Treasury, said, great leaders and managers need to be prepared to make decisions with between 40 and 70% information. And I just thought, man, I've been sitting around waiting for 100% for a long time. So I really like what you just said, because that's right on.
Thank you.
And since we're just like, I'm just gonna like extend like 3 more minutes. If there's like anything you really wanna say something that I didn't allow you, or because of the time constraint, like please, like this is an opportunity to reflect some discussion or questions that I didn't ask, and you wanna engage, please go ahead. Or books that you want to recommend.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really like is just having been in the women's leadership field for 10 years is seeing how the research has changed. And so we're really moving from a place of thinking of women as, how can we compensate for our deficiencies, to actually really having massive strengths. And it's all coming out in the research. So negotiation is something that the first research on this came out from Hannah Riley Bowles at Harvard. And this is in contrast to the original research from a book called Women Don't Ask. And it said men negotiate 2 to 3 times more for women than women, 4 to 8 times more than for starting salary, right? So it's really a deficit. And then a few years ago, Hannah Riley Bowles did some research which showed that women, when advocating on behalf of others, blow everybody away in terms of negotiation. It's like you see those articles, mom lifts car to free son, Herculean strength. How did this happen? And women will do incredible things for others, but we won't always do it for ourselves. So get together with somebody who's an advocate of yours and practice for that negotiation, and think about for whom you're advocating. Because wouldn't it be great to have you on a webinar in the future? And you're telling your story, and you're a role model to all of us, right? So advocate for us.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that, I really hope like many of you do join and become a member of the Harvard Alumni Entrepreneurs Group. And I think DC, and especially if you're in DC, please do reach out to me. And one of our goals is truly try to like make sure like DC is and will remain as a hub for entrepreneurs. And as you see today, like we had like 3 wonderful female founders, and the city offers so many different opportunities, whether in politics or infrastructure. Like, so please do join the HAE, because it really allows you a networking opportunity, but also people who really want to help you, because everybody wants to be resourceful, but also helpful, because we do want to see women succeed, and we do want to see women and male partnership as well. And I think that's what we're all about here. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And please, learn more about how to become a member with the HAE, and reach out to all of our panelists. Like if you want to engage with them in business opportunities or consulting, whatever opportunities that you have in mind. And I'm sure they would be pleased to hear from you.
Thanks for leading us today, and to Regina, who's the force behind all of this.
Yeah,
it was great listening to you guys. Honestly, it's just never gets old.
Right.
I could listen to your stories all day.
We're definitely in great company today.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, like, I think Cassie, you're spot on. Please do follow Regina, because she also shares like so many wonderful events, not just in DC, but across all of HAE different branches and chapters. So you get to learn that so many opportunities that are available that weren't prior, right? So, and also like take advantage of this opportunity of online learning. And thank you so much for everybody coming, and please stay tuned for our next events. We do have a lot of good events lined up.